Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation, Neglect Costs More, Optimize Total Cost of Ownership for Your Fleet. I'm Kevin Linger. I'm the managing editor and producer for Fleet Equipment, and I'm the moderator for today's event. Today's webinar is brought to us by AMCS. Managing a fleet goes far beyond vehicle purchase price. It's about making smart moves that protect your bottom line. And in this session, we'll break down what TCO really means for fleets like yours and how hidden costs like fuel, downtime, unplanned repairs, even driver behaviors add up fast when maintenance gets pushed off. Before we get started, I've got some housekeeping items to run through. As part of the webinar, we will have a live Q&A sessions. We'll address some questions during the last portion of the event, but to improve the chances of your question being answered, don't wait until the end of the event. You can submit them now. Ask your questions as you think of them. All you do is type them into the Ask a Question box and click the Submit button. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on demand for you to view. We encourage you to direct your coworkers to the recorded presentation after the event. Tomorrow, you'll get an email with a link to the recording, and it will also be posted on our Fleet Equipment website. Within the webinar software, you have the ability to open, close, and resize different elements on your screen. To make a window larger or smaller, simply grab a corner of the window and drag it around. You can also make some windows full screen by clicking the Maximize button in the upper right corner of that particular window. If you need to receive a certificate of attendance, click on the graduation hat icon within the black toolbar on the left side of your screen. In that same toolbar, you'll also find icons to share the webinar by email or on social media. If you're watching us from a mobile device, you might need to click the 4 dots menu in the upper right corner of your screen to see those different icons. Your feedback helps make our events better. So please click the survey icon to leave your comments about today's topic and our presenters. The survey will also appear in the middle of your screen toward the end of the event. If you need help at any point during the webinar, send us a message through the Ask a Question box and we can help. And finally, if the slides stop advancing, or if you're having problems with audio, try pressing the F5 key at the top of your keyboard or Command R if you're on Mac. That will refresh the webinar console on your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We're happy to have John Davis joining us. John's worked in the fleet maintenance industry since 1983 and joined Dossier Systems, which was later acquired by AMCS in 2005. He's responsible for the Fleet Management Consulting Group, an in-house team of former fleet managers who help AMCS fleet maintenance customers implement best practices and fleet management software. John's team also helps users who want to improve their use of the software or get their operations to the next level. While most of his time is spent in the field working with customers, John also works closely with the AMCS transport product and development teams to bring daily real-world user perspective to the product. Today, we also have John Walborn joining us. He's the sales engineer for AMCS Fleet Service. John is an experienced sales engineer at AMCS Fleet Maintenance with a robust background in the transportation industry that spans nearly 2 decades. Since 2005, John has dedicated himself to understanding the intricacies of fleet operations and maintenance, making him a valuable resource for organizations who are looking to enhance their efficiency and reduce costs. As a certified director of maintenance and equipment through NATME and a graduate of the TMC Leaders of Tomorrow leadership program, John brings a wealth of knowledge on optimizing TCO for fleets. Now, let's get the presentation started. John, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome. I'll just go real quickly over our agenda. We're going to discuss where are our realities, where are we right now in 2025, and if we neglect maintenance, what impact does that have? Most people know, but when you see the numbers, I think it's very impressive. Why do we want to look at total cost of ownership? You know, that's our big picture, and we can get it on a metric that will across different operations that you might have, you know, about different sites and things of that nature. And while we're not going to give you an absolute on how to do the total cost of ownership, we will show you one that we believe in that is part of the Technology and Maintenance Council, which is the Council of the American Trucking Association. You could modify the formula to fit your needs, but we'll at least show you that. How can we reduce what our ownership cost and our operating costs are? And then we're going to leave time enough for the questions, and please put those in as quick as you can so that we can get to as many as possible. So with that, I'll go over here to John and we'll get started.
Thanks, John. All right, as you just saw on the agenda, one of the biggest challenges fleet leaders are facing today is a rising cost in maintenance. And that's where I want to start. So everyone in this room is feeling it. Maintenance costs have jumped nearly 40%. That's not a small bump. That's a large increase that forces every organization to rethink how they're managing their fleets. Maintenance has become one of the biggest drivers of total cost of ownership. And if it's not managed strategically, it will erode profitability. So let's unpack what's really behind this increase, and then we'll look at what you can do about
One of the things I want to add to that statement John made, that 40% came from the TMC. That was a number that they provided us in 2024. We don't have the final numbers for that yet, but in their survey of the fleets, that number was from 2020 until the end of 2023. That's we all know what happened in 2020, but still 40% is a dramatic increase in just 3 years, right? So we'll go into that a little more in depth, and we have a poll for you here, and what we want to know is, do you think you really have good oversight of your total cost of ownership? And we'll leave it up for a little bit of time, and it's just a yes or no. And if we can get the responses for that, it'd be interesting to see so that we can give the results. It's a challenging thing, right? Because there's a lot of moving pieces. So it's a piece that I have always in quest to be able to get that answer. Company I work for, that's how we started as a consulting business in 1979, and that was the whole thing. We were trying to understand the total cost of operation, and the software evolved from that, because we were just taking pieces of paper back then and assembling it and trying to make some consulting decisions based on what we saw. So the software sort of evolved from there. We'll give it a little bit of time here just for everybody to get the results. So remember, there's a poll question up if you could answer that. And our question is, what's your visibility into the total cost of ownership today? All right. We'll give it just a little bit more time, see if we can get a few more responses from it. But what we're seeing here is 72% of the folks that have responded say no, they don't have good oversight. And that's not surprising. That's pretty well normal, right? And that's why you're looking at what can I do to be able to get visibility into that. So that, because if you're not measuring it, you can't take action on it. So, all right, I'm going to hand it back to you, John.
Excellent. Thanks, John. So in the next section, I want to review the key factors behind the increases. So first, let's look at aging fleets. Older vehicles come with more frequent and costly maintenance requirements. It's not just maintenance alone. Older equipment is also less energy efficient, leading to higher fuel costs, slower output, and unexpected breakdowns that create downtime and operational disruptions. When you combine repair frequency with inefficiency, aging fleets significantly inflate TCO, which makes fleet turnover and life cycle planning a crucial consideration. Second, as labor rates rise, so do repair bills. Skilled technicians are harder to find than ever before, and their availability is driving costs up. On top of wages, repair complexity is increasing across the board. Vehicles and fleets today are packed with advanced technologies. And while these features improve performance, they require specialized tools and expertise to repair. This means longer repair times and even higher repair bills. If unchecked, these costs can snowball, eroding profitability over time and making maintenance an even deeper financial sinkhole. Finally, we need to talk about the parts inflation, a significant driver of rising expenses. The last few years have seen supply chains disruptions across the globe. Combined with soaring demand, this creates a perfect storm for component pricing. Prices for replacement parts and consumables are higher than ever, but the problem doesn't end there. Part shortages also mean longer lead times for repairs. Extended downtime directly impacts fleet productivity and compounds maintenance-related costs. So to summarize, we're dealing with a perfect storm of rising costs from aging vehicles, higher labor, and repair needs, and part inflation. Together, these factors explain why maintenance costs have surged just 40% in the last couple years. If these trends continue, unchecked maintenance will become an even bigger piece of the TCO puzzle. Thankfully, while these challenges are real, they're not insurmountable. In the next section, we'll focus on strategies and tools to combat rising costs and help optimize your fleet's TCO.
And there's one thing that really jumped out at me. So I looked some information up, and it was about, I'm at the very end of the baby boom generation. I'm the very last year, right? So there's people retiring like crazy. And that wealth of information, the knowledge, that the practical experience that people have gained, that institutional knowledge is going out the door at a pretty fast clip. And the numbers that I got were, it's 11,200 people turn 65 every day in the United States, right? And they're predicting between 2024 and 2027 that we're going to have 4.1 million people retire. It's just massive what we're facing, right? That in conjunction with what happened in 2020, there were a lot of people. I had people in my group decide that it was time to retire. And so, it's putting real pressure. And my whole career, I've heard about technician shortages and things of that nature. And yes, there can be in certain areas, it's a challenge, right? And to find people that will work and do well. So you've got to give them the right tools, the right environment, all the things that, to be able to try to combat that. The parts are more difficult, right? I mean, the people are challenging, but, a lot of those parts are, it's just where we ended up with in the supply chain. So we have seen that stabilize in 2024 in some areas, right? Some areas they're still having it, but we're not seeing the massive turn. So we might be past that a little bit. So we'll see.
All right, preventive.
Wait a minute.
No, you were right, John.
It jumped on me there. Hold on. Let me get back. There you
Perfect. Go. Excellent. So preventive maintenance, or PMs, isn't just about turning wrenches. It's one of the most powerful levers you have for controlling TCO. When done right, PMs reduce the two biggest drains on cost: downtime and unpredictable repairs. That means fewer road calls, more predictable budgets, and longer asset life. PMs also connect directly to safety and compliance. Vehicles that are consistently maintained are less likely to fail inspections, less likely to create safety risks, and far less likely to expose your business to fines or legal issues. And it's not just the fleet side. Strong PM discipline improves driver confidence, technician efficiency, and customer satisfaction because assets are reliable, work gets done on time, and fewer surprises derail your operation. So preventive maintenance is clearly valuable, but what happens when it's skipped or delayed? That's where the costs really begin to snowball, and that's what we're going to unpack next. Okay, so when costs rise and budgets tighten, it's tempting to defer or skip preventive maintenance, thinking it'll save money in the short term. More often than not, that decision ends up costing far more in the long run. Preventive maintenance isn't just about keeping vehicles running, it's about protecting your bottom line. Skipping PMs can cause a chain reaction of costly consequences that go far beyond the immediate savings. Let's break down exactly how skipping PMs impacts TCO and your overall business. The first part is going to be expensive breakdowns. It's no surprise that skipping PMs increases the likelihood of breakdowns, often at the worst possible time. These breakdowns are typically far more expensive than the cost of regular preventive maintenance. Minor issues that could have been addressed during maintenance can turn into major failures, like an overheated engine or a failed transmission, leading to repair costs skyrocketing. Unplanned downtime. Breakdowns don't just cost money in repairs, they also create unplanned downtime. When vehicles are stuck in the shop instead of on the road, they're not earning revenue or delivering value. The indirect cost of downtime, missed deadlines, unhappy customers, and disrupted operations can exceed the direct repair costs and create operational headaches. Compliance risks. Skipping PMs can also lead to compliance issues, particularly for fleets under strict safety or emissions regulations. Vehicles that miss inspections or routine servicing are more likely to fall out of compliance, leading to fines or even pulled registrations in severe cases. Lower resale value. Vehicles with inconsistent maintenance records or known issues from neglected PMs tend to have a much lower resale or trade-in value. Fleet managers ultimately lose money when it's time to rotate or resell vehicles that haven't been properly maintained, further inflating total TCO. Unsafe driving conditions. Skipping PMs isn't just a financial risk, it's a safety risk. Neglecting to service brakes, tires, or other crucial systems can lead to accidents, putting both drivers and other road users at risk. The liability and potential damage from unsafe conditions far outweigh any savings from missing maintenance intervals. Productivity losses. Downtime and break times don't just impact vehicles, they also impact the employees and the operations that rely on those vehicles to get the job done. Truck drivers, technicians, or field workers are left idle when vehicles break down, creating ripple effects across your organization and reducing productivity further. And lastly, reputational damage. That can take a hit when maintenance gaps affect your reliability. Late deliveries or service delays caused by breakdowns can lead to dissatisfied customers. And in today's world, dissatisfied customers aren't just unhappy quietly. They're voicing it publicly. A damaged reputation takes time and effort to rebuild.
There's a number that we've used for a lot of years, and it really hasn't changed, although the total dollars are more now because of inflation. But the number on unplanned maintenance, so a breakdown, that number is generally 4 times more expensive than if you did the work as a planned job. And it's very hard for people to measure this because it's easy to figure out what's my tow bill. Okay, got a $3,500 tow bill. That's easy. And now I've got to pay mechanics or technicians to work overtime to either get that piece of equipment going, or if they had to take time out to finish the work that they were doing because you need a piece of equipment for a run or a job or whatever the next day. And the last piece is, there's 2 other pieces, right? The last piece as far as in the operation there is the driver. Maybe you're having to try to pay that driver or operator of that piece of equipment overtime or extra time, and you're not getting any real productivity out of it. And then the last, and that's one that's really hard. A lot of places don't do a good job of measuring it. Like, why did we pay them extra or whatever? Some places do a great job. Some don't know at all. And the last one is, what do you have to do with those customers? You know, say you're picking up trash and recycling and you miss them. Well, they're angry. Maybe they want a credit for it, or maybe they want you to come back or whatever. Right. So or the load didn't get there in time, right? Or they missed the trip completely, or whatever it might be. All of that becomes a factor. And just not too long ago, I did a article on people going back to something that was used many years ago, and that's the preventive maintenance to do things ahead of time. So, for instance, we are going to change this turbo because we know it fails at, whatever, 400,000 miles, 500,000 miles, and we're going to change it a little early. And we do that. That sort of fell out of fashion because people were just saying, well, wait till it breaks down. But now our tow bills have gotten so expensive that people are taking a second look at that. And that's a good part of your operation with preventive maintenance, dealing with that. And, at beginning, it looks as though it's driving up costs, but it will, over time, lower the total cost of ownership and operation of the piece of equipment. All right. Now we have another poll for you. When you're thinking about your fleet's cost, which expense category is the hardest for you to accurately track or forecast, right? Now, fuel, that goes up and down, we know, right? And when somebody told me something very interesting one year, and they said, I, as a maintenance manager, I can't really control the price of fuel. That's an international thing. But I can control our fuel consumption by doing proper maintenance, keeping the fleet in good order. And between the tires and between just good maintenance on engines, transmissions, whatever, alignments, anything that affects that, we can affect the fuel consumption that we use, right? That's one thing. But do you even know? Do you even know what you're doing, right? And then repairs, obviously, how much repairs are we having to do? The downtime, or is there something else that we didn't consider here? Those are the ones we hear frequently. So we're very curious as to what do you think what's the hardest for you to have knowledge or to forecast? So we'll get that poll published for you. Okay. Give it a few more moments here to be able to track and see. It looks like so far much in the lead, very much is downtime. And that one's hard, right? And there's and a couple things about the downtime, right? One of them is there's maintenance caused downtime. Did we cause it because we didn't do something correctly, right? We missed it during preventive maintenance, or we just did poor work, or whatever we might have caused it, right? Attributed to maintenance. But there's other downtime, right? Piece of equipment's in an accident. Well, that's not maintenance. We didn't cause that problem, right? But it still is downtime, and it should be tracked because one type of equipment may have one cost, and the downtime to get parts and everything else might take a lot longer than the other. So tracking and understanding overall downtime, and then the subset of the downtime that we can affect, right, which is maintenance attributed downtime. But total downtime, that could impact, right? Like maybe this type of equipment, we just can't get parts, or we can't get the dealer that has to do the work to do the work for us, or whatever, right? So that's a very, very interesting that's the result of that, is that it's 58% say that downtime is their biggest concern. And of course, I don't know what the something else's are. We got a few of that. So if you could send it to us in the questions, we'll see if we can get that addressed. All right, let me move on from there. Okay, John, back over to you.
Thanks, John. All right, so why TCO is essential for fleet leaders? Let's start with the problem. So fleet leaders face rising costs across the board. Fuel, parts, labor, it's a lot. On top of that, scattered data and hidden inefficiencies make it difficult to see the big picture and manage costs effectively. Without a proper view of total cost of ownership, or TCO, it's easy to miss key opportunities for improvement, and that can directly threaten your bottom line. Key challenges. One big challenge is underestimating indirect costs. Many focus on things like fuel and maintenance, but forget about downtime, compliance, admin overhead, and safety-related costs. Those indirect costs can slip under the radar and undermine your financial strategies if ignored. Managing TCO means capturing the full picture, not just the obvious expenses. And then some cost insights for 2025. Looking ahead, fuel costs are expected to remain as one of the biggest contributors to TCO, accounting for 50 to 60% of cost per mile. That's up to 35% of your total ownership costs. Maintenance and repair costs are projected to increase by 3%, driven by parts inflation and labor challenges. These trends highlight why managing TCO isn't optional. It's essential for building efficiency and staying sustainable as costs rise. So to kind of wrap this section up, TCO isn't just a financial tool. It's a strategic approach that every fleet leader must embrace to navigate these challenges and maintain profitability. Together, these issues making skipping PMs one of the most expensive, cost-cutting mistakes a business can make. The short-term savings rarely outweigh the long-term financial, operational, and reputational consequences. Preventive maintenance protects your vehicles, your workforce, and your bottom line. As we continue, we'll focus on strategies that can help ensure PMs are prioritized without disrupting your operations. I think perfect. Okay, sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing there. Each bucket has levers you can pull with better data and planning. So when we look at TCO, it's not just a single number. It's really a collection of cost buckets. Each of these buckets has levers that you can pull, but only if you have the visibility and the data to make those decisions confidently. In maintenance, the lever might be shifting from reactive maintenance to preventive maintenance. In repairs, it could be improving part sourcing or vendor negotiations. In fuel, the lever is often telematics or route optimization. The key point is TCO isn't static. Every bucket has opportunities to influence outcomes, but you can't improve what you can't measure. Here's a fuller picture of what makes up TCO. We all tend to focus on the obvious: purchase price, maintenance, repairs, but when you expand the view, there are other costs that quietly add up: training, support, compliance, even security. For example, purchase is considered the starting point, but life cycle planning often matters more than the sticker price. Repairs and maintenance is where the bulk of fleet leaders' attention go, but costs rise fast if not managed proactively. Campaigns, warranties, recalls, frequently overlooked but can return significant dollars when tracked correctly. Another area is training and safety. Investments here prevent much bigger costs down the line. The reason we show all you these is simple. When you look at one or two pieces, you're missing the full picture. That's why TCO is an important framework for fleet leaders. It forces you to consider the entire life cycle, not just the line items you see most often. All right, so total cost of ownership. Up until now, we've been looking at the pieces of TCO. But when you put them together, it forms a formula that gives you the full picture. This is where you can move from a fragmented view of costs to a true total cost of ownership calculation. So let's just have a short overview of each section. Starting with the acquisition cost, which is your upfront investment. This includes things like the purchase price, taxes, fees, and delivery costs. Operating costs are your day-to-day spend, things like fuel, maintenance, repairs, and consumables. Finance costs usually contain lease payments or interest tied to purchasing of the asset. Depreciation is the loss of value over time, whether the asset is leased or whether the asset is owned. Compliance costs include inspections and regulatory requirements, including things like fines. Management costs, the hidden piece, including things like admin overhead, software, and staffing needed to run the fleet operation. The power of using this formula isn't just adding the numbers together. It's that you start to see how these costs interact. For example, investing more in preventive maintenance can actually lower both operational costs and compliance risks over time. So when someone asks, what does it actually cost to run our fleet? This formula isn't the answer. This formula is the answer, sorry. And it's why the visibility of these 6 areas are essential if you want to make confident, data-driven decisions. All right, so key strategies for lowering the TCO. We've covered what's driving up costs, how skipping maintenance compounds the problem, and what makes the TCO formula. Now let's talk about the part that matters most, what you can actually do to bring these costs down. The first area is shifting to planned maintenance. One of the most effective strategies is to target 80% of your work as planned, not reactive. Every emergency repair is not only more expensive, but it also disrupts schedules, causes downtime, and eats into productivity. By planning work, you spread costs more evenly, keeping assets on the road, and reducing surprise breakdowns. Think of the difference between a $200 scheduled service and a $5,000 engine failure on the side of the road. That's the type of leverage planned maintenance gives you. Next would be using PM software. Spreadsheets and paper-based processes can only get you so far. Fleet maintenance software helps streamline workflows, keep technicians aligned, and reduces chaos in your shops. This helps make sure inspections don't get missed and the maintenance tasks are tracked consistently. The software also allows you to analyze trends over time, so you're not just reacting to issues, but proactively identifying patterns. Prioritizing maintenance. Not all preventive maintenance is equal. Some have a bigger impact on asset reliability and safety than others. With data, you can prioritize high-value tasks, making sure the most crucial work gets done even if the budgets are tight. This is where TCO and preventive maintenance really connect, because the best predictor of cost and reliability isn't mileage. It's how consistently you're keeping up with the right maintenance. Optimizing your inventory. Inventory is one of those hidden costs. If you overstock, you tie up cash and parts that might sit on the shelf for months. If you understock, you risk extended downtime waiting for those parts to arrive. The sweet spot is ensuring the right parts are available at the right time. And that requires planning, data visibility, and sometimes vendor agreements for guaranteed fast access. Think about a truck waiting 3 days for a $40 part. That downtime cost will far exceed the cost of the part itself. And finally, the last part here is going to be leveraging better data. Data is your multiplier. When you connect fuel, maintenance, and telematics data, you start to see patterns. Patterns like a certain vehicle consuming more fuel, or a particular site running higher repair costs. With that visibility, you can address the root cause instead of treating symptoms. Better data means fewer breakdowns, lower fuel waste, and ultimately longer asset life. And that's what the real ROI of TCO management comes in. So when we're talking about lowering total cost of ownership, it's not one silver bullet. It's a combination of strategies, planning, prioritizing, optimizing, and using better data. Together, these levers give fleet leaders the ability to not just survive rising costs, but drive efficiency and improve profitability.
And I wanted to talk about a couple points here on what John was mentioning with the planned maintenance and the preventive maintenance software. The ability to get that compliance where you want it. I'll give you a thought. What a lot of companies, what we've seen, where they're large organizations, and there's not a direct line. Like I say, I'm a site manager somewhere, like at a facility. And then maybe I have a regional manager, maybe there's a corporate manager, right? Oftentimes that you don't answer up in that order. You answer to the general manager or operations manager that maintenance comes under at a given site. So we know that doing preventive maintenance, if we do it on time and do a great job of it, that we're going to preserve the value of our equipment and lower our cost of operation, right? Our total cost of ownership will at least stabilize, and we won't have these crazy spikes and unexpected pieces. So what you can do is you can give some incentive for that. Okay, any good fleet maintenance software system out there is going to have a PM compliance reporting. And how good are you doing on this, right? Some are very important, like maybe your state inspection or your DOT inspection. And the others might be, well, it's just a lube oil filter. That's important. Maybe it's important for your warranty. Well, how do I get it to that compliance? So if I can get, if I was working for John and I'm the manager and he says, okay, you got to get to 95%. And we're not going to set an aggressive plan that we can't meet. You've also got to be reasonable. If you don't have enough people, you may have to stretch some of the stuff out a little bit while you get enough people, but you can't set yourself up for failure, because that just brings frustration to everybody around. But if you can get that compliance where you want it, it improves everything. And I've been doing this quite a number of years, and what I've found is that that hasn't changed. That's a constant, right? Getting preventive maintenance done, if we can get it done on time, and do the work correctly. And we didn't speak about it, but we got a couple of minutes here, and that was, for instance, standard repair times. So you see, the dealerships especially, right? And then you've got the third-party publishers that publish it, and they say, this takes X amount of time. That's great. And they do a pretty good job on it if it's an F-150 pickup or, a car or something that they studied. But a lot of the equipment that I know that you deal with is complex equipment, two-stage type builds, chassis, and then different body manufacturers, right? So they don't have a lot of details on how long that takes. That's fine. You figure it out for yourself. You say, this, 500 hour or A level PM or whatever it should take 3 hours for us to do this. What you'll find is, yeah, there's people, your first expectation would be like, oh, why does John always take 4 hours and it should take 3? Is he just no good? Is he not properly trained, or is he just not fast, right? What's wrong with me, But the other one is the one that I found very surprising when I started analyzing this a while back, and we see it consistently across the fleets, and that's shortcutting. So as management, you've studied it, that it takes 3 hours. There's no way they could do all those checklist steps in anything less than 3 hours. But yet they're consistently taking 2 hours to do the work because somebody's rushing them. Maybe they're short of help, right? If you look at that and you say, wow, these are under, right? So anybody that, most good systems are going to track standard repairs and, how you're complying with them. How does that correlate with unexpected breakdowns, right? Which we know are so expensive in many ways that we've discussed. So looking at that, and that stuff is hard. You've got to have a system to do it for you, right? To make it easy. Say, oh yeah, look, we've done all these ones that should have taken 3 hours. Here's one that they did it in an hour and a half or whatever. And look at the result. We've got a lot of driver reports. We've got breakdowns. We've got everything, right? And it's not right. We shouldn't have that. So looking at all of that in the big picture can really improve. But it's the simplest thing, right? It's the most basic thing you could do in fleet maintenance is getting preventive maintenance done in time. And think about it broadly, right? It's not just changing the oil or doing the inspection, but are there components that we know that should be changed and we could save that breakdown, right? It's like, okay, maybe I got a $500 part and we normally wouldn't change that part until it stops, but where it stops might be very expensive for us to get somebody, and not just having to tow something in, but also maybe having to have a repair done at not your home facilities that, cost a lot more, and not to mention all the downtime and things of that nature. So with that, let me move on here. And this is a quote from one of our customers. They've been around about 25 years, a very respected fleet company runs buses, which is what I did for 21 years, right? So this is Higgy Coaching Tours out of Pennsylvania. And understanding their cost, right? It's so important because not only do they, run the coaches, they run school buses, right? And those are, our taxpayer dollars being spent. They want to make sure that they do as efficiently as they can. And of course, safety, right? The school buses, it's, such a concern with the children, right? And they're able to track every detail and be able to see month, year, life, all of those different cost of ownerships, and then measure that over time so that we know if we buy this model, this is what our cost is. This is what our cost per mile is, or our cost per hour, or whatever that metric is, versus this other model for things that they can control and they can buy. So we're able to, they're able to monitor, and really any good system is going to be able to monitor those things so that you can start analyzing it. You'd be very surprised. I was at one of the, I'll just leave it at that. They're in the top 5 LTL carriers in the United States, and they're still doing DBIRs on paper. Don't let it throw you that you're still on paper or still on a spreadsheet. You're in good company. There's still tons of companies, because what happens is you grow, and then all of a sudden you're at a certain size and you say, my goodness, it's unmanageable. And where we normally see that delta is at about, on a truck side, it's about 50 trucks. You can do things pretty good if it's under 50, right? With spreadsheet or some notebooks or whatever, right? Basic maintenance. But when you start getting past 50, that's the time to start looking and saying, what are we using, right? What are we doing to evaluate? Because accounting is going to tell you how much money you spend. You know that. But then the next question they're going to say is, where are you spending it? You might know the big buckets. You might know the tires. You might know fuel. You might know fluids and repair parts. But you don't know what's the detail of what making up that, what makes that up, right? Where are those costs going? So now, where we're heading now is that's the end of our presentation that we have for you. And We're going to look and see what questions we have. And there's a question box. We'll look and see what we have there.
Yes, thank you both, John and John, for that great presentation. And we're going to start that Q&A in just a few moments. Before we do that, I'd like to ask everyone, please complete the survey that's popped up on your screen. We do need your feedback, those of you in the audience. As a special incentive to complete the survey, we're offering a $10 Amazon gift card to 25 randomly selected people who complete it. Survey should be appearing in the middle of your screen shortly if it hasn't already. If you don't see it, you can launch it manually by going to the black toolbar on the left side of your screen, clicking the survey icon. Now let's get to those audience questions. The first one here we have from Matthew Maluski at International. How much do you estimate PM can reduce TCO costs, assuming that a well-maintained vehicle is more reliable and results in less failures or expenses?
Here's what I can give you on that. So here's what we normally see. So say we go and do a deployment and they really weren't on top of their preventive maintenance. You know, our salespeople would love to say, hey, your ROI on putting this solution is going to be very, very quick. The reality is it takes time, right? And actually those costs go up. If you haven't been doing certain preventive maintenance schedules, your costs are going to go up because now you're doing something that you should have been doing, right? And then they will level. I have looked at a lot of graphs. I usually look at a 3 to 5 year period, right? Most of the time it levels out. I'd love to be able to say that it goes down, but the reality is you're chasing inflation, right? And so while you might be doing a better job, you've avoided costs that you would have had if you weren't doing it, right? Now, it's easier to talk about things on that aren't directly related to the asset on costs, such as inventory, right? Looking at obsolete inventory and stuff like that. That's pretty easy to say, yes, we can save you some money there, right? It doesn't affect that actual truck or piece of equipment, but it is going to reduce the overall capital that's sitting out there on a shelf. Now, the one thing that I haven't ever really been able to get good data because it doesn't seem to be tracked in a consistent model is we know how much we pay overtime, right? To mechanics. We know drivers too, if they're paid by the hour or what have you, or maybe they have some penalty pay that they get because the truck broke down. Companies don't do a very good job of measuring that, you know, and attributing it to it. So there's some that do, but it's very hard to get that data. So, but normally, you know, the normal number that we see is somewhere around 10%. That it just depends on how bad it was, right? Because as I said, it's going to take you, sometimes it takes a couple years. If it's a large fleet and they haven't been doing stuff on schedule, they don't know, right? They have no idea of where they were starting from, right? So they don't know how many PMs weren't getting done. And all of a sudden, like I said, you see the costs go up. But then at least once you level them or hold them, you're actually saving money because inflation would have made it gone up, but you're holding those costs steady. So normally you'll see a result after a year, but the bigger the operation and the fleet didn't get ill overnight, it's not going to get well overnight either. So it does take time.
That makes sense. And you mentioned inflation, which leads nicely into our next question here. So this one might be tricky because things can change as the wind blows. But Matthew also wants to know, is there any particular components that are mainly driving up parts costs? And the examples asking maybe lubricants or another specific category.
Well, they certainly have. It's a significant cost. Right. I got a number the other day. I was looking at some study on a front load trash truck, for waste and recycling. And depending on, what's there, oil change now is $700 to $1,000 cost, right? With, using synthetics and things like that. The fluids have gone up a lot. The cost of the fluids, it certainly has been an increase. And, the bus, the construction equipment, the waste and recycling trucks, people do all the analysis, right? They do fluid sampling. A lot of the over-road people don't because they turn the truck so fast they don't care, right? But with that, if they're going to go ahead and do extended drain times, you've got to do the oil analysis to be able to understand that, right? So that you can safely work on containing those costs. But it was interesting, that question, because lubricants have been one of the highest things that we've seen increase. I think we've also seen it some on things, electronic components, sensors, things like that. I'm not an expert at why, but I know what we see, right? So those seem to be, and then of course, obviously our labor. The labor's been a huge factor.
Another question here from Jonathan Rigetti, looking at comparing in-house costs versus outside costs when tackling a preventative maintenance program.
It's very interesting, and one of the challenges when we go into a deployment, and I ask somebody, what's your fully burdened rate for your mechanics, right? Because there's a formula. The Technology Maintenance Council has a recommended practice for you. It doesn't matter. You can modify it, but you just need to be consistent year over year to follow. Okay, this is what we consider. So half of my building expense for the shop goes to, my overhead and comes up with my cost per hour, right? And so we normally, you go to a dealer, go to any dealer that you do business with. What's their hourly rate? Okay, knock it down 20%, and yours is going to be about somewhere in there, most likely. If you're not, then you're not capturing all the costs that make it up having your own shop. But if you have your real amount, it plays very well into this, because then you can monitor what's my cost, per mile if we're doing all this externally versus if I do it internal. And sometimes the operations are too spread out to be able to justify having an internal shop. So, but the biggest thing that you have to do when you're measuring that is you have to have a accurate, fully burdened labor cost for the shop.
Another question here. This one's a pretty good one. So we've got data in 5 different systems. What's the easiest way to get the true cost per mile without spending hours pulling reports?
Yeah, so what you want is to be able to bring the data in some way that it from the other system. So for instance, take fuel, for instance, right? You got 3 big ones out there that have been doing it forever, right? We want to import that data or bring it in via the API so that we don't have to go in there and then take that and add it to another spreadsheet, right? Another example of that would be, so we've sat here and we've talked about what's my cost per mile, what's my cost per hour, what's my cost per kilometer, all those sort of things, right? But think about it more broadly. So think about if you're in the oil delivery business. We want to know what's our maintenance cost per gallon of oil delivered, or milk. They normalize that to gallons, right? Even if it's pints or half gallon, whatever. What's my cost for that, right? What's in the trash business? What's my cost to pick up, what's my cost per ton of picked up trash? What's my maintenance cost, right? So, but those should be able to come into your system so that then you can take it. The other thing that, at least what we've seen, which is very exciting in bringing different systems together, is like Power BI. So you could take information from a fleet maintenance system, you could take it from, say, your dispatch and operation system, and you could bring that all together for a dashboard view that would tell you everything that you need to know. So dashboarding and bringing those pieces of information together, because for instance, in our world, vendors are maintaining an accounting system, but we still need the vendors on our side to be able to issue a purchase order and receive parts and all that. But we want that to be the system of record. We want it to be able to come in, and we want to be able to tie that together to keep that disconnect. You don't want to have to do things. You don't have to do the same thing 3 times. You don't want to put a part receipt in the fleet maintenance system, and then I got to key that same thing in again, then in the accounting system. You don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to have systems that will integrate, and integration's easier than it's ever been in my career because of the open RESTful APIs are the main driver of that.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to have any disagreements that entering data multiple times is not something anyone wants to spend their time doing. We do have one more question here, and it kind of stems from that. You touched on a little bit, talking about oil versus trash or delivery. Once you have all your data and you're looking at that TC or cost per mile, do you have benchmarks for what a good cost per mile should be?
That's very interesting to talk about. So our founder of our company, he worked on that for a lot of years with permission for customers' data. And you're going to get all kinds of numbers thrown at you from different people, but here's the number that matters. Let's use an example. It's trash, right? I got a trash truck that runs in Chicago or Detroit, and then I got one that runs in Miami, Florida. Same exact truck. You're going to have very different costs. You have different labor costs, you have different component costs, and you also have different climate, right? So what you have to do is to be able to compare it against your own operation to be able to see, because I wouldn't trust anybody else's data to know, are they capturing all do they have a fully burdened labor rate, right? Are they really capturing all their external repairs? Are they capturing all of that? So, and how accurate is in miles? So we're saying good cost per mile. How accurate is that? If you use the telematics, doesn't matter which one, right? Using the telematics and you bring in those meter readings, like say every hour that the piece of equipment runs, then you've got that good meter. It's a very hard thing for fleets to get, is good, consistent meter readings. So take the human out of it, right? We're all going to make mistakes as humans and miskeying a mileage or something. So let the telematics do it, right? We've come a long way. I've been dealing with telematics integrations for a couple decades now, and they're so much more mature than they were in being able to give you that information. And people constantly miss how much it costs chasing mileage and meter readings when you've got oftentimes supervisors or people having to deal with it and go out of their day, because you can't track the when your PM's due, if it's due on miles or hours, you can't track your total cost of ownership without a good basis for that, right? So as opposed to give a benchmark, all systems are going to give you a good benchmarking on what the total, what the fleet cost is, the cost per mile, all that sort of thing. And you do want to look at it, are we way outside of the norm? The only thing I can suggest is the Technology and Maintenance Council will give a number. They don't publish it typically, but they will give a number, but it's heavily to just one vertical, and that it's heavy to just the truck companies, right? Because a local truck company that delivers is very different than an over-the-road truck company, and the age of the equipment and everything else. So, but managing against yourself and knowing how you're doing, that's the real number, right? No matter what a manufacturer or salesperson tells you it's going to cost you, you're going to have the evidence. And that's good to be able to use also too when you're negotiating, right? Like, look, it cost me this much, this truck cost me a little more than this truck. What are we going to do? So it's a good question.
A lot of great insight today from John and John on total cost of ownership, not only aggregating the data, but then how to leverage it into your operations. That's going to wrap up our Q&A session for today. I want to remind everyone that a recording of the webinar is going to be available on the Fleet Equipment website. Feel free to log in to view it again, or encourage your colleagues to view it. Tomorrow, you will get an email that contains a link to that recording. That wraps it up. Thank you, everyone, for your time, for stopping by. We really appreciate it, and hope you all have a nice day.
Thanks for your time.